seated. And as you sit, turn with me to the book of Amos. The book of Amos, we're going to chapter 4. Amos is after Joel, which is after Hosea, and it is before Obadiah, which is a very short book. And so if you get to Jonah, you're already gone past Amos by 2 books. In Amos chapter 4, we're looking at verse number 12. Therefore, thus will I do unto thee, O Israel, and because I will do this unto thee, prepare to meet thy God, O Israel. This morning we're looking at this instruction of God to Israel: prepare to meet thy God. Prepare to meet thy God. I want to ask you a question. If you had one day to live, what would you do? What would be your priorities if you knew for sure you had one day to live? If you had 1 week to live, what would you do? If you were told you had 1 month or just 1 year to live, what would you do? That people lived 100 years or more does not violate the need to live a prepared life. Israel lived as if they forgot the need to be prepared to meet God. Israel had Yahweh, Jehovah, as their God. Other nations of the world had their different gods. But Israel had identified Yahweh as their God, the only true God. Well, the nations that did not choose Yahweh does not mean that Yahweh is not their God. Because when they die, they don't meet with any of those idol gods. Their soul goes straight to Yahweh, and he decides what to do with them. And so the message was for Israel, because they knew the true God, believed as if eternity didn't matter. For Christians, the rapture takes place in a twinkle of an eye, not giving enough room for preparation. And therefore God says, prepare to meet thy God. Most people live as if eternity is already here, as if eternity doesn't matter. They do not take eternal issues seriously. Issues like heaven or hell. God's purpose or will are not things that people look or consider as they pursue the affairs of this life. They've never stopped to ask, why are we here? How do you please a God that we must meet? A God that we have no choice but to meet him. A God that you cannot avoid. You can ignore him now, ignore his word, ignore his command. But when once you depart from here, you cannot ignore him. You cannot avoid him. You cannot escape from him. He's a God that all of creation must meet, all humanity. So, when you have a short time, this is what you do. You prepare. I recall the story of Jacob. He had spent many years in Paddan Aram. And God now says you need to go back home. He needed to get back to Bethel. Then on his way, he was confronted with the fact that he may not make the trip all the way down there. Because there is this enemy who was supposed to be a brother called Esau. And so suddenly Jacob discovered that his days are numbered. His days are limited. His days are numbered with very small number. And so Jacob prepared to meet Esau. He sent out droves, he sent out presents, droves of cattle and all that, all the things he has amassed in Paddan-aram. Suddenly, they didn't mean much to him. And so the cattle, the sheep, the goat, he sent them in droves, one after another. He sent Esau a present, was preparing to meet him, to see if those will change anything at all. Send him a presents in droves. He was ready to part with all the wealth he has labored for 20-something years. All the blessing he's told, everything, he was ready to part with it in order to deal with the fact that he had to meet God immediately. Because if Esau killed him, he would come face to face with God. So he sent the presents. Number 2, he sent his precious things. After sending all those animals in droves, he then picked up his family and divided them and set Rachel behind and Leah in front and all the children in the various families. If he kills this one, maybe by the time he gets to the third one, there will be mercy. He sent them. Sent them across the Jabbok. And Jacob was left alone. And then Jacob finally did something he was supposed to be doing all the time in his life. He prayed. There was a man, an angel came and wrestled with him, and they wrestled all night. And at the break of the day, the angel said, "Let me go." And I'm talking about Genesis chapter 32. "For the day breaketh," and he said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Really? How shall we bless you? Do we bless you as Esau? How shall we bless you? Shall God bless us as sinners? How shall we bless you? Do you want us to bless you and you don't meet God in peace? What is your name? And then it just occurred to him. What got him on this trip to Paddan-aram was the fact that he decided to be Esau. And so for once he said, "I'm Jacob." And the angel said, "That's fine." And he blessed him there. He sent his precious things. He sent out his precious things, sent out the presents, sent out the precious things, and then finally sent out prayers. And it's the prayers that got him prepared to meet God. Of course, it was a disappointment to Jacob as he was about to die that his sons were not as prepared as himself to meet with God. And so when you look at Genesis chapter 49, you discover that Jacob was desperate to let his sons know the truth, that some of them were violent people, some of them were murderers, some of them, their anger slew way too many people that ought to have been slain. Jacob prepared because he knew he had a short time. Hezekiah prepared when he knew he had a short time. And you see that king, the king may have felt it was ready all the time. The king may have felt there was nothing to be changed in his life. But Hezekiah in 2 Kings chapter 20, Hezekiah, the scripture says in those days, Hezekiah was sick unto death. And the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, came to him and said unto him, "Thus saith the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live." In our time, it's not Amos that is going around. It's not Isaiah that is going around. In our time, it's the doctor that are telling people, "Look at this MRI. Go prepare your house. You will die. This disease kills people." In our time, it's not the prophet that's going around telling people they must die. In our time, it's the blood test, it's the MRI, it's the X-ray, it's the CAT scan, it's the diagnosis of the physician, it's science that is telling people, "Prepare, you must die." And it's a fact that no man can escape. And so for this king, the servant of God, the prophet came and said, I know you are sick, and you're expecting God. You are thinking it's one of those fevers. You're thinking it's one of those headaches that comes and goes. You're thinking it's one of those pains and your joints that is going to leave you. No, this one, you are dying. So set your house in order. Get ready. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech you, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. Again, it was time to pray. It was time to seek the face of God in order to be ready to meet with him. No other issue was more important to this king at this time than prayer. A king. He's so busy with all his meetings. He's so busy with all his state issues, with all his politics, with all these things he has to take care of. The king. Nothing else mattered because he's told he needs to meet with God. And that meeting, God holds the agenda. That meeting, God decides when the meeting starts. That meeting, no human being arrives late to that meeting. That meeting, you cannot call to say you are in traffic. That meeting, you cannot call to be excused that you can't make it today. That meeting, you must make it. And so since you have no choice but to make that meeting, Hezekiah could not say, I'm king, I'm very busy. Isaiah, can you come back another time? No. Because no other issues mattered to this king at this time than prayer. When Hezekiah knew he had only a few days to live, even though he lived right. Verse 3, he tells God, look at how I lived my life. He lived right. He said he had a perfect heart towards God, and God didn't argue about that. Now you think of what happened to those that cannot say they have a perfect heart towards God. How much readier we should get. He was ill, he was sick. We don't know whether it's for a day, for a week, for a month. We don't know how long he was sick. But the issue was that he needed to be ready to meet God. That was the king. And then this man called Noah. Noah, remember that man? Married, with a large family, married, knew people, served God, and was warned of God, and prepared an ark. 200 years, the ark was in the making to the saving of his house. If he did not prepare, he could not take anybody with him. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 7 rather. Hebrews 11:7, it says, by faith Noah, being warned of God, of things not seen as yet. Noah, God was warning him about something that's unprecedented. God has never destroyed the world by flood. God has never done what he was about to do, and even though it took 200 years, right from the first day God warned Noah about it, Noah was working at it until the flood came. And thank God he was preserved. He says, by faith Noah, being warned of God, of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became the heir of righteousness, which is by faith. We looked at Jacob, we looked at Hezekiah, we looked at Noah, people that were warned to prepare, to be ready. And yet there's still Nineveh to look at. Nineveh was warned. They only had 40 days left. God saw that their lives was wrong. God saw that the way they lived, if they came to meet him, he had no choice but throw them in hell. And so God waited till the last 40 days. Maybe it was last 60 days. Because, the tantrums of Jonah have taken a few days. Because when God now told Jonah, get up and go to Nineveh and tell them, I'm about to send judgment against them. Did Jonah go there straight? Jonah go bought ticket, headed to Tarshish?